Alors bonjour, il est maintenant 10 heures. Nous allons commencer. Mon nom est Martine Perrault, conseillère aux communications au bureau du directeur parlementaire du budget. I'm pleased to welcome you this morning to the briefing. Thank you all for joining us. Alors, la session de ce matin sera bilingue et les instructions en français vont suivre sous peu. For today's briefing, our PBO, Mr. Yves Giroux, will provide a brief presentation following by a question period. During the presentation, please keep your microphone on mute to minimize background noise. And if you would like to ask a question, please indicate, you can use the raise your hand in the button in the button at the top of the screen or writing a question in the chat box. Pour la session d'information aujourd'hui, notre directeur parlementaire du budget, M. Yves Giroux, fera une brève présentation qui sera suivie par une période de questions. Pendant la présentation, veuillez garder, s'il vous plaît, vos micros en sourdine afin de minimiser les bruits de fond. Si vous souhaitez poser une question, vous pouvez utiliser le bouton de la main levée en haut de votre écran ou indiquer votre question dans la boîte de dialogue. Merci à vous encore pour vous joindre à nous ce matin. Alors, je laisse la parole à Yves.
Merci, Martine. So today we are presenting a life cycle cost of the F-35 program. What we are terming Canada's F-35 program is Canada's acquisition of 88 fighter jets, including all program costs from the initial program development through the end of their useful life. Donc, aujourd'hui, on vous présente le coût de cycle de vie des F-35, donc le programme des F-35. Et ce qu'on appelle le programme des F-35, c'est l'acquisition de 88 avions de combat qui remplacent les F-18. Et ça inclut tous les coûts du cycle de développement, du cycle initial de développement jusqu'à la fin et à la disposition, le démantèlement des avions. Donc, les étapes du cycle de vie sont définies comme suit. Donc, le développement, c'est l'ensemble des activités qui précèdent l'achat ou la construction. C'est essentiellement la gestion du projet, les activités de gestion du projet. L'acquisition, c'est évidemment l'acquisition des avions de combat eux-mêmes, mais ça inclut aussi l'armement, les munitions et les pièces de remplacement initiales, généralement pour une période de 2 ans. Ça inclut aussi certains coûts d'infrastructure, de gestion de projet une fois que l'acquisition est en cours, ainsi que la formation initiale et certains équipements qui sont nécessaires pour accueillir les F-35. On inclut aussi dans cette période-là des gestions un peu de risque associées surtout au taux de charge. Operations and Sustainment. Bon, je vais continuer en français. Les questions d'opération, c'est surtout les questions de personnel, le carburant, ainsi que des améliorations continues au système des F-35, ainsi que la gestion et le maintien des infrastructures, les hangars, ainsi que les pistes d'atterrissage. Et finalement, le démantèlement, c'est lorsqu'on enlève l'armement, on démilitarise les appareils et on en fait le recyclage. So the life cycle phases include the development, which is mostly project management activities, acquisition, which is the acquisition, obviously, of the fighter jets, but also the weapons, ammunition, and initial spares for a 2-year period, as well as domestic costs such as infrastructure, hangars, and landing strips for the F-35s, project management for the acquisition, training, and additional tools and equipment for the F-35s. That also includes in our model some risk adjustment, mostly for foreign exchange. Operations and sustainment phase is all the activities related to the use, transport, and maintenance of the system. So it's manpower, so salaries, as well as energy, so fuel, jet fuel, training, continuous systems improvement, and infrastructures, operations, and sustainment. And finally, disposal is demilitarization of the fighter jets at the end of their life, and also disposal of whatever is left over, disposal of hazardous materials. So, background and scope, we are looking at the 4 phases. Development phase started in 2016-17 and is ending this current fiscal year. The acquisition phase has started last fiscal year and should end in 2034-35 with the acquisition of the last of the 88 fighter jets. Operations and sustainment will start in 2025-26 with delivery of the first of the 88 fighter jets and should end in 2061-62 when the last of the 88 is at the end of its useful life. Disposal starts when the first of the fighter jets is disposed of and ends when the last is disposed of. Donc, notre contexte, c'est la portée de l'étude. Ça contient la phase de développement qui a déjà commencé en 2016-17 et qui devrait se terminer dans l'année financière en cours. L'acquisition, je sais qu'on a perdu l'image, mais ça va revenir. L'acquisition a déjà commencé, la phase d'acquisition, et se termine en 2034-35 lorsqu'on va recevoir le dernier des 88 avions de combat. L'exploitation et mise en service commence en 2025-26, se termine en 2061-62, lorsque le dernier des 88 F-35 va atteindre la fin de sa vie utile. Et la phase de démantèlement commence lorsqu'on met hors service le plus vieux des 88 F-35. Il se termine lorsque le dernier sera démantelé en 2061-62. Donc, la phase de développement évidemment, c'est des données qui sont pour la plupart déjà connues. Donc, puisque cette phase-là a déjà commencé, c'est des données historiques qui correspondent aux activités de gestion du projet au ministère de la Défense nationale, environ 0,2 milliards de dollars avec très, très peu d'incertitudes. The development phase is mostly based on historical data because it's already well underway and should conclude this fiscal year. So there's very little uncertainty related with the development phase at $0.2 billion. The delivery profile of the F-35s, it's expected that the first one will be delivered in 2026 on a calendar year basis, where 4 will be delivered in 2026. The pace of delivery should accelerate and pick up and gradually to reach 18 per year in 2029, and that rhythm should be sustained until the last ones are delivered in 2032, 18 in that year as well, for a cumulative total of 88 fighter jets. So we have also done a sensitivity analysis. So should there be delays in the delivery of these fighter jets for whatever reason, if there's a slippage of a year, that would increase costs of about $400 million. Should there be a 2-year slippage, the increase in cost should be about $0.7 billion. Les chantiers de livraison estimatifs des F-35, on estime que les premiers devraient commencer à être livrés en 2026, les 4 premiers. Le rythme de livraison devrait s'accroître progressivement pour atteindre sa vitesse de croisière en 2029. Donc 18 par année à partir de 2029 jusqu'à 2032. 2032 devant être la dernière année de livraison, donc où on va recevoir les derniers des 88 F-35. On a fait une analyse de sensibilité pour déterminer ce qui arriverait dans l'éventualité où il y aurait des retards de livraison. Donc, si l'ensemble des livraisons était décalé d'une année, les coûts seraient augmentés de 400 millions de dollars. Si les délais de livraison s'élevaient à 2 ans, on aurait une augmentation de coût de 0,7 milliards de dollars. C'est pour donner une idée des ordres de grandeur sur les coûts si jamais il y avait des retards dans les livraisons. Donc, L'étape d'acquisition, il y a évidemment les coûts d'acquisition du matériel, comme on l'a mentionné, qui représentent 10,7 milliards de dollars. Les armes, les munitions, les pièces de rechange initiales, pour les premières 2 années de pièces de rechange, 2 milliards de dollars. Il y a d'autres coûts d'acquisition pour presque 6 milliards de dollars et des rajustements en fonction du risque, principalement un risque de taux de change, puisque les acquisitions vont se faire principalement en dollars américains. Et pour amener les coûts de l'étape d'acquisition en dollars canadiens, on ajoute un facteur de risque pour un total de presque 20 milliards de dollars pour l'étape acquisition. So the acquisition phase consists obviously in the acquisition of the fighter jets themselves for $10.7 billion, the weapons, munitions, and initial spares for the first 2 years at $2 billion. There's other acquisition costs, and we also include a risk adjustment, mostly related to the foreign exchange, given that the acquisition will be done mostly in US dollars. So to bring this into Canadian dollars, there's a risk related to foreign exchange, and that leads us to a total for the acquisition phase of almost $20 billion. The operations and sustainment phase is made up of operations, so that's fuel, jet fuel, as well as salaries for those operating the fighter jets, $9 billion. Sustainment, which is, as I explained earlier, it's sustainment, it's, sorry, I have a blank here.
Right, so sustainment includes maintenance, all 3 levels, support equipment maintenance and repair, even things like software maintenance, supply chain management, and so forth.
Thank you, Chris. And other operations and sustainment costs for a grand total of almost $54 billion. L'étape d'exploitation et de maintien en service, il y a évidemment l'exploitation, donc principalement les salaires des personnes qui vont devoir opérer les F-35 et les faire voler, incluant ou en plus du carburant. Le maintien en service, qui inclut les coûts de maintien, évidemment, maintien en service, donc l'entretien des appareils, les réparations, les maintiens des logiciels nécessaires au F-35, la gestion de la chaîne de logistique ainsi que la gestion du programme et l'acquisition de matériel pour l'entretien des appareils, donc pour presque 15 milliards de dollars, ainsi que d'autres coûts d'exploitation pour un grand total de 53,8 milliards de dollars. Finalement, la phase de démantèlement où on démilitarise les appareils, on les démonte, on dispose des matériaux qui sont potentiellement nocifs et on recycle ce qui peut être recyclé pour les 88 appareils pour un total de 0,2 milliards de dollars. So finally, the disposal phase where the fighter jets are demilitarized, dismantled, and whatever can be recycled is recycled for a total of $0.2 billion for the 88 aircraft. This is a visual of the life cycle cost, a high-level summary of the timelines as well as of the cost of the 4 various phases from development, acquisition, operations, and sustainment up until disposal for a full life cycle cost of about $74 billion. We find that this is roughly in line with the government's own estimate of about $70 billion for the life cycle cost. For a project of this magnitude, both in terms of cost and the time span, it spans several decades. We estimate that our estimate and that of the government are broadly similar, so there's no significant gap between what the government has publicly estimated the cost to be and our own estimate. Donc ici, sur cette diapo, vous voyez une représentation visuelle qui résume le coût du cycle de vie des 88 F-35, de la phase de développement jusqu'à la phase de démantèlement. Donc, on arrive à un total de presque 74 milliards de dollars, ce qui est à peu près semblable, très semblable plutôt, aux estimations du gouvernement pour qui la phase ou le coût du cycle de vie est estimé à environ 70 milliards de dollars. Et on considère que c'est des estimations qui sont assez semblables étant donné que c'est un programme d'une grande ampleur, des coûts importants, mais aussi qui s'étalent sur plusieurs décennies. Donc, pour cette raison, on ne considère pas qu'il y a un écart significatif entre notre estimation et celle du gouvernement qui a été fournie par le ministère de la Défense nationale. Ça conclut notre résumé, notre présentation. On sait que c'est plutôt rapide. Si vous avez des questions, des commentaires, ça va nous faire plaisir d'y répondre. Utilisez la fonction main levée ou écrivez plutôt vos commentaires dans les voies de discussion. So that concludes our presentation, which is, I know it's quite fast and a high-level summary of our study for the life cycle cost of the F-35. If you have comments or questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand or write your comments or questions in the chat section of the Teams. The authors of the report are here with me, and between the three of us, we should be able to provide you with answers. Donc, les auteurs de la part sont avec moi. Ça devrait nous permettre de vous fournir de bonnes réponses.
We have one question. So can you please tell us your name and the media you represent, please, Dave?
You're probably still on mute.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, how's that?
It's perfect.
Okay, Dave Lazy, Ottawa Citizen. My question is, earlier when you were talking about the delays, if the aircraft is delayed in delivery, I think you said, it was very quick, but I think you said 400 million for a 1-year delay, 700 million for a 2-year delay. So my question is, that isn't in your 73.9 billion life cycle, right? So those are additional costs if there are delays.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great. Just another question for you, if I can. In the U.S. Congress and I guess their version of various auditing groups, GAO or whatever, have raised issues about the high sustainment costs for the F-35. And it seems to be a fluctuating number. So how did you come up with your maintenance cost? Did you, did you have like an average of what it is now, or what? How did you do that?
So we looked at the experience so far in partner countries, mostly the U.S., because there is quite a bit of information available from the Congressional Budget Office and also the U.S. government, and that's the source of information. Chris?
Yeah,
to add?
Sure. With respect to how we went about the calculation, we used, just to go to Yves' point, the comparability between U.S. approaches to accounting for operations and sustainment costs and Canadian are very similar. So that was our primary source, but they have, as you mentioned, it is a bit of a moving target in terms of what, say, the cost per flying hour is. So we appealed to multiple point estimates of such, and yes, we took an average.
Great, thank you.
Giroux? You're probably still on mute.
Yeah.
Or you don't have a question. Murray Brewster?
Hello, folks. Hi. I just wanted to ask about the estimate for the acquisition, because the federal government is going to be putting a lot of money into upgrading airfields and other infrastructure. And I've just had a quick look at the report. Can you tell me, does your estimate include those costs as well?
Yes, our estimate, the acquisition phase includes the cost of infrastructure for the infrastructure that will be required for the F-35s, notably the 2 Air Force bases, Cold Lake and Bagotville, the hangars, as well as the landing strips. And
there's also some funding for cybersecurity and data storage as well that we understand.
And my other follow-up question relates to one of your predecessors was deeply skeptical about the figures that National Defense presented 12 years ago for the acquisition of the F-35. Your numbers are now, as you say, broadly in line with what the Department of National Defense is estimating. Is it fair to say that you have confidence that the Defense Department has a very clear idea of how much this is going to cost taxpayers and how much this is going to cost the government to operate over the lifetime of the aircraft?
I think it's a fair statement. I'm not sure I would go as far as saying they have a very clear idea, but they certainly have a much better idea than they did in 2011 for 2 good reasons. I think they learned from the mistakes of the past when underestimating the costs doesn't serve any big purpose in the longer or even the medium term. But also there's quite a bit of experience that has been gained by other countries, such as the US, on the acquisition and operations of these types of aircraft. So learning from experience, but also looking at the experience and the data gathered from other countries. Other questions?
Yeah. Is there other question? Hey, we are aligned, hein, Yves?
Yeah. Great minds thinking alike. D'autres questions? Je ne vois pas de main levée. Okay, now I see one. Dave.
Hey, another question for you. The aircraft is going to get software upgrades, over that course of period. So I just wanted to confirm that your costing estimate includes the software upgrades that are planned, I guess. Did you get kind of a schedule of that, or a kind of an understanding of what's being planned? Say 15 years out when the U.S. Air Force comes up with a new software upgrade.
Sure. In our information request to National Defense, of course, we asked for anything that is pertinent to the life cycle costs, and that included what you are describing. I think it falls under the umbrella of contributions under the Memorandum of Understanding, which includes such things as the software upgrades, even refits for engines, for instance, because there will be multiple blocks, and yeah, these types of through life improvements should all be included in this estimate.
Okay, great. Supplementary question: did you back to the delay issues or potential delay issues? Did you examine the potential for delay of Canada's F-35s, or is it just more this is the number if they're delayed 1 year or 2 years?
It's more of the latter. It's not a judgment as to the likelihood of delays in the acquisition, but as we've seen in many big acquisition projects, delays do tend to happen. However, with the F-35s, they're already in production. It's not like the surface combatants for the Navy. But we don't pass judgment as to whether it's likely or not. But because of the experience in big procurement projects, we thought it would be a good idea to give an order of magnitude, at least, as to what would happen if there were to be delays. But it's by no means an indication that these delays are likely.
Thank you.
Mr. Brewster, you have another question?
Yes, since we're going to a second round of questions. I wanted to ask if there is, in your view, a way for the federal government to perhaps like lower the costs of acquiring and maintaining the F-35? Like, is there a cheaper way of doing this?
So that's a good question. So it would require an analysis or the capacity to predict whether Canada will indeed need 88 fighter jets, whether it's more or less, and we don't have a position on that. We're not specialists in military doctrine and the capacities that Canada will need in terms of fighter jets. So we've taken the 88 as a given. Whether there's cheaper ways of doing this, once you take the number of fighter jets as a given, the main remaining factor in terms of cost is the number of flying hours per year on average for the 88 fighter jets. Our understanding is what D&D plans on doing is flying these jets less on average per year than the US Air Force. So there's already savings in that respect, and using more flight simulators than actual flying hours. So the main way of saving more would probably be to fly these fighter jets even less than what is planned based on the information we were given by D&D.
So just for clarification to your statement, so Canada plans to fly the F-35s less than the US, and if it flies the F-35 more than it has planned, then these costs will increase. Is that correct?
Yes, the salaries, the fuel, and the maintenance costs will go up if, for example, Canada was to fly on average these fighter jets more than what D&D has indicated to us they plan on doing.
So, I don't mean to jump in with a third question, but since it seems to be only Dave and I here, did D&D give you an indication of, on a percentage basis, of how much less Canada intends to fly the F-35 than in comparison to the Americans?
We were given numbers. I don't remember off the top of my head, but Chris has a better memory than me, probably because he's younger.
Right. So based on the information provided us by National Defense, we're expecting that each aircraft will be flown roughly 167 to 170 hours. That's a fleet-wide average per aircraft per year. When you look at American figures, you see that they are expecting, that is to say, they aren't currently necessarily, to fly their aircraft when the fleet reaches a steady state between 225 and 250 from the information I've seen per aircraft per year. So it is less. And it's as Yves said, that the force generation and credential retaining aspects for pilots will be handled more via the use of simulators. And beyond that, I can't give any further detail.
Thank you.
D'autres questions? Other questions? We're happy to take compliments as well. I'm kidding. On prend aussi les compliments. Donc, s'il n'y a pas d'autres questions ou commentaires, on peut conclure la présentation. Si jamais vous avez d'autres questions ou commentaires, vous pouvez toujours nous contacter pour avoir des réponses. So given that there are no other questions or comments, I think we'll conclude it for today. But if you think about further questions or comments, you know how to reach us, and it will be a pleasure to try to provide answers. Merci beaucoup.